the portal is a tool on provided to us or provided by Hprc that allows us to access the Hprc clusters and services within a web browser, and it can be accessed through the landing page at portal.hprc.tama.edu. We have a lot of services from job submission and monitoring, file transfer and management, file editing, and shell access, and interactive applications. So let me go ahead and start off by saying, in order to use the portal, you have to be connected to the Cisco AnyConnect VPN. It's the same procedure as connecting to the cluster through SSH. So let me go and walk us through this. So it's as simple as going to portal.hprc.tama.edu. And then you'll be given this landing page letting you choose which open on-demand portal you want to use. We have the Terra on-demand portal and the Grace on-demand portal. Today we'll be using give me 1 second, let me fix that. Okay, perfect. Okay, so we're gonna be using the Grace on-demand portal today. I hope you guys can see my screen now, but we can go ahead and enter the Grace portal. So this is the initial, I guess, setup. We have the message of the day. It's the same as when you SSH into the cluster. And then here's a couple of the services. We have files. We have the home directory and the scratch directory. The home directory, we have a little file explorer, interactive GUI in which you can manage your files. Here we can see this is my home directory. I have my my own directory, and then a scripts directory, a Python file, and then a module available file. So similarly, we can go to the scratch directory, and we're going to be doing something in the scratch directory soon enough. But as you can see, you can use the GUI to do a lot of things, such as edit files, rename or move them, download files. You can also upload files using it if you want to use this as a mechanism rather than through the terminal. You can also open in terminal, so you can find this location in the terminal in the cluster, and then you can also make new files. So back to the portal, this is the job composer. You can see any active jobs you have going on. Here we can see that right now I have my Jupyter Notebook running, and it's running on Grace. So you can see a little bit about the account number, the amount of time that it's used, and then you can also delete the job. Okay. So you can also use the job composer to create jobs. So we have a couple of templates. You can make your own job or from a selected job, and then you can edit the files. There's more information on this in the wiki to help you use your job composer. And then you can also view templates over here. So as I said before, we have two clusters that are running and available right now. We have the Grace and Terra cluster. So a part of the Open On Demand portal, we can use the shell access, so that way we don't have to SSH into the machine. We can go straight into the in our web browser and be able to access the machine as usual. So as you can see, same thing as the terminal, except in a web browser, it might be a little more convenient. So it's a really useful tool that's available on the Open On Demand portal. Let's see, what else do we have? And then next, and of course, this is available on Terra as well. So there's a lot of apps available visually through the Open On Demand portal, from ANSYS to Abacus. But today we're going to be demoing and showing off Jupyter Notebook. So let's go ahead and click Jupyter Notebook right here. And a little bit about the different options you can choose. You can choose which module of Anaconda you want to use, which is pretty useful if you want to choose a specific Python version. And then later we'll be talking about how to create your own virtual environment. And then you can also choose a different compiled Python. This is a little more advanced, but there's definitely more info about it on the wiki. And then you can customize things like how many hours you want this Jupyter Notebook server to run, how many cores you want it to use, and then how much memory you want it to use. And then you can also specify which type of node. So if you want any node, or you want to specify a GPU node for more visually intensive tasks. And then you can also provide an account number so that the SUs get charged that account. And you can provide an email so that whenever sometimes the job queue is busy. So you can provide an email so you get a notification whenever the server is up and running, so you can go ahead and access it. I'm gonna keep it in the default settings for now, and then I'm gonna launch the notebook. So another thing is like, we saw that I had a notebook that was running. Here it is right here. You can see that it's been running for 32 minutes. So our launch notebook, it's currently starting. It takes a couple of minutes just to spin up. If you reload the page, either it should be ready or it'll take just a few more seconds, or if the job queue is busier, sometimes it'll be useful to put your email in there. So now my Jupyter Notebook is ready. We can connect to the Jupyter Notebook. And then we can choose files and notebooks within our Scratch directory. So I can also create a new notebook by clicking New and then Python 3 notebook. So from there, it's as simple as renaming the notebook to whatever you want, and then it's the same functions as a regular Jupyter Notebook, but now it's running on the clusters. And beyond that, let's go ahead and do a little training exercise. We're going to go back to the Open On Demand portal, and we're going to go to Scratch. And we're going to go to the Scratch File Explorer using the GUI, and then click on Scratch. So this is going to take you to the Scratch directory, and you can see a folder named Training. We're going to click on Training. We're going to go to Open On Demand Jupyter Primer. We're going to click on the sample Python notebook. We're going to click Open on Terminal. And then same thing, we're going to log in. Approve Duo. So there's the file right there. We're going to move this or copy this file to our own Scratch directory. We're going to say CP sample Python notebook, and then // user / and then it's going to be whatever login you have for your cluster. So for me, it's just my net ID. So it's going to be Chris Peter Francis. So I'm going to go ahead and click enter. And it's going to copy and paste that file into my own Scratch directory. So once that is copied, we can go back to the Jupyter Notebook server that we were running, and you'll be able to see that the file populated. You can click on it, and then here's a couple of statements to get us familiar with Jupyter Notebook, a little bit familiar with Python, and I guess how. Oh, thank you, Keith. He posted it in the Zoom chat. So here's a little sample about the Jupyter Notebook. So Jupyter Notebook is based on cells. So let's say here's a print statement. If I wanted to say something else, if I wanted to say good morning, I can press Shift and Enter, and then this cell and only this cell will run. You can do things here. We have a name equals input. We can run this cell again, and then it'll ask for different input than the previous notebook. So my name's Chris. I'm going to put in Chris, and then it's going to say, welcome to Hprc, Chris. So all of these fields are populated right now, but let's say I have a dependent field. So here we have the variable A, and we want to access it here. We run into a compile error. And the reason for, or an interpretation error, and the reason for that is these cells are pre-cached. So it shows the information from when it was last ran. So it keeps that information. So if you want to access these variables, you have to rerun the cell. So in this instance, we're doing A equals 12, B equals 2, and we're doing some simple operations on these variables. And now we've defined them because we've run the cell. So if we run this cell now, we can access A. So it prints out A, and then it prints out my integer, hello, and then it prints out the list. So this cell is basically describing a couple of variables in Python. We have the integer, we have a string, and then we have a list. And this prints out the type of variable. So we can see again, this is a class of an integer, this is a class of a string, and then this is a class of a list. We can also access parts of a list by putting a number in brackets, and this number is going to be the index of the number or the index of the variable we want to access within the list. Here we're accessing the first one because indexing starts at 0. So we get 1, and then 0 to 3 is all the variables from 0 to 1 or 3. And then let's see, we have functions that we can do within in Jupyter Notebook. So if I run this cell again, we have to run this cell in order to access this cell where we call the function. So we're just saying A equals 3 and then B equals the square of A, and then we get an answer to that one. And we can do live edits. So if I do A times A and I created a cubic function, hopefully we can rerun it. There we go. So it changes the output automatically. And if we wanted to do all of this without having to rerun each cell, we can also do run all. So it's going to rerun each cell just like before. It asked me for my name. So I get to put my name in again, and then it reruns these cells, which is useful if you have a lot of dependent variables where you're making a lot of changes and you need the dependent cells to be updated. So next, these are two tools, Numpy, which is for numerical Python, and then Matplotlib, which is a Python plotting module. So here we have two lists. We're taking the list and concatenating them using X and Y, but that's not really what we want, right? We want to add the list of the two numbers. When we think of adding two lists, we think of adding the numbers in the same index. So you can use Numpy to achieve this feature. We take the list and then convert it to a Numpy array for both of them, and then add them together, and we get a new result, which is what we want, where we have each number added up together. We can also use other NumPy functions on these lists, which become really useful, such as the sum, which takes all of the numbers in X and then adds them up. So next, we're going to be taking a look at the more analysis with Numpy. We have a height of a couple of students, the weight, and then the we're going to be taking a look at we're creating an array of these heights and then the weights, and we can use this to create more powerful mathematical operations, such as finding the BMI of each person within the list, and then making a new list using those values. So you can also do Boolean operators within the variable. So BMI, we're only looking for BMIs that are greater than 25. So NumPy will automatically print out all the variables that are, or all the BMIs that are greater than 25, and truncate all the rest. So the next module is Matplotlib. It's a Python plotting library. So we're taking this BMI plot of this NumPy array and then saying we want to plot this. So Matplot creates a graph for us, and we can customize the graph. But here is let's say I added 2 more numbers to this list. We're going to go back to the idea that we're going to iterate through each function. So after I added 2 more numbers, our graph does change very slightly, but it does change. Maybe if I had an outlier, it would have a greater difference, but we can use this to plot our values, visualize data. And here we're saying, oh, Matplot, can you give us a histogram? And then show it to us. So now we have new data because of the one I inserted, and we have this new histogram. So you can also do Linux commands within the Jupyter Notebook. So here are a couple of examples. We can print out the current working directory. So here is the pwd, print out the working directory. And we put an exclamation point in front of it to signify that it's a command, a simple command. And then we also have ls, which is used to list all the files in the current directory, files and folders, sorry. So as we can see, we printed out my current directory, which is under my Scratch user and my NetID. And then we also listed the files and it prints it out. You can also do commands such as cp, which we did earlier for copy and pasting. And we copy just one file to another location. You insert a percentage sign in front of it or behind it, just to make sure that the notebook interprets it right. And you can do the same with remove file. So Jupyter Notebook also engages in a formatting known as Markdown. It's a tool that's used to, I guess, format notebooks and make them more visually appealing and organize data. So we're going to be running through a little bit of Markdown. Here we have, so let's say I want a title for a notebook. Let's say Chris's notebook. If I press enter, we can see that this title gets printed. And if I wanted something smaller to specify like a subcategory and say, for example, Python, then I click I add the double pound signs and it'll make it a different size. Similarly, you can add up to 5 pound signs and it'll change the formatting of the title. And then there's this one is written in HTML. you can use it to create lists. So if you need to organize data based on lists, you can use HTML, or there's Markdown specifications as well. And this is just another example of what we did earlier, where we use different types of headings or Markdown tools to change the size of the title. And then here's an example of embedding links in Markdown if you need to insert links into your notebook. And then you can also do mathematical equations. So this one is a little more difficult, but there are a lot of Markdown tools to where you can easily develop and create visually appealing notebooks using Markdown and organize your data. So these are a couple of the things that we can do with the Jupyter Notebook. And let's say your code also doesn't work. It might be due to a kernel error. So we can do something like restart and run all for the kernel. It's going to restart and clear the cache for the kernel. So it's going to take a while to restart the kernel. And then now it runs again. So it keeps the cache data and then it runs the data again. So that's a more than simple intro to Jupyter Notebook and a little bit about Python. If anyone has any questions about Jupyter Notebook, go ahead and put it in the chat. And if you need more help with setting up the notebook, the slides are available on hprc.tamu.edu. Going to events, short courses, primers, and then Jupyter Notebook on Hprc open on demand. So the next thing we're going to be talking about is using a virtual environment to load specific modules. So you might want to use specific modules to load a Python module, but not have it in a different project. So we're going to walk through these steps. They're all of this information is on the slides or on the wiki. So we're going to follow through on this. First, we're going to create a new directory, which we call a pip environment. So I'm back at my terminal here. So we changed directory back twice and we're back in Scratch. So we go to user and then your login for Grace or Terra. So we're going to do make directory -p pip _ environments. So now that we've made the directory, the next step that we're going to do is we're going to purge any modules that we've loaded. So change directory into pip environments module purge. Okay, and then we purge any modules we've loaded. So we're going to create a virtual environment using a name for under the pip environment. So so we're going to load a Python module from we have to specify which Python module to load. So if we go back to Jupyter Notebook, we can see the available notebooks. We have Anaconda 3/5.3.0. So I'm going to load that one. So I've loaded the Anaconda module, and where is it? So this, we can use Conda to create the virtual environment. So this is more information about using Conda instead of using pip. So there's different steps. So I loaded the module, and then we're going to use Conda create and a new notebook. So we're going to follow the steps on that slide. -n, my notebook. We're going to give it a few seconds. Oh, I forgot to put the flag. There are some typos in my typing. So then we're going to activate the notebook using source, and then we're going to click Y to activate it, and then source, activate my underscore notebook. So now we're in the, we've activated an environment, so we can do things such as Conda install. I don't have a particular Python module that I want to do, but we can say Conda install Numpy, or we can specify a specific Numpy version that we want to use. So let's say your project is dependent on a specific Numpy or a specific Matplotlib. You can make sure that your virtual environment is set up correctly to where the correct modules are loaded, and then you won't run into dependency issues. And after that, you'll be able to connect it to the Jupyter Notebook within the Open on Demand portal. Let's see. We'll give it a few seconds.
Will this environment be saved for future use?
Yeah, so it'll be in the Scratch directory. We had a question in person where if you create the environment, will it be saved? So if you create the environment in your Scratch directory, it will be saved, and then you can activate it at a later point in time. So, which is really useful for when you have multiple projects. You can change the dependency of each project as you go along. So it's downloading a lot of dependencies for Numpy right now, just because this is a completely new environment. Obviously, some use cases, you don't need any of these libraries or anything other than the default module. So it might be a better move to just not create a virtual environment and use default notebook. I probably should have chosen a smaller module, but yeah. So there is more information regarding using a virtual environment and Anaconda specifically within our wiki. It'll give you more information than what we cover in the primer. Then next, to activate a virtual environment, we're going to go back to the Jupyter Notebook, and then we will have to start a new session. And now we have to provide the full path name to our virtual environment. So for me, it would be scratch user, crispy differences, and then let me see the directory that we were using. So pip environments and then my notebook. If that's correct. Okay. So now we can activate this environment, and then we have my Numpy version instead of the one that's provided to me. So again, same rules. We wait for the server to be launched. There is a little bit of a queue, but now we have a Jupyter Notebook with a virtual environment instead of, or our own virtual environment instead of the ones provided to us. And then we can install our own modules on top of that and then customize our environment. And just for future reference, you can also see all the Jupyter notebooks that you've run recently. It'll be stored up to 6 days. And then you can also stop your instances or your notebooks from this dashboard as well. So this notebook is taking a little bit longer than the other notebooks, and it might be due to congestion or the fact that I have other notebooks running and it's taking up the service. But it shows that like the email service is useful whenever you need to use a notebook. And you can also check out the session ID, which takes you to the output and logs that the notebook gives you, which is useful if you want to troubleshoot the notebook or take a closer look at it. And I think that's pretty much it for the Open on Demand portal or Jupyter Notebook. Does anyone have any questions or ran into any issues with the modules?
Yes, I have a question. So this is running the main node, not charging us for the SU.
So we had a question on whether it charges us for the SU. So a staff member can correct me on this, but I'm 99% sure that whenever you run the job, that'll run on a compute node. So in my example, I used 1 CPU and then 2 gigabytes of memory, and it will charge me 1 SU for using the notebook. But it does charge you for using the notebook, but you can obviously choose how much resources you are using.
That's when we launched the notebook, we set the hours like for 1 hour.
Yeah.
And even if the job is still running, the Jupyter notebook will be killed at 1 hour.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is better to overestimate. Oh, and then we had a question on whether if the Jupyter notebook will be shut down if you specify 1 hour. So it will be shut down. So it is better to overestimate how long your notebook does or your process does take. And just so that you can avoid having to reuse SUs or the process of restarting your job. So I think that's the extent of the questions we have today. I hope that you guys learned a little bit about our Open on Demand portal, which is a really useful tool. At the end of the slides and throughout the slides, all of this information is available. There is walkable steps, and the Jupyter Notebook that we use today and all the information will continue to be available on Scratch or on the website, so that if you ever need to reference it again, you can go back and reference it. And then these slides provide a reference to the notebook that we use today. So if you ever need to look at or review, you can go back and look at the slides. So if you want to do continued learning, we have a channel where we provide these kind of primaries and more information regarding our Open On Demand portal. We also have short courses coming up, and then we do have a wiki page. So it provides a lot more detailed information about and walkthroughs about using the Open On Demand portal. We have the Open On Demand portal right here, and we have all this information such as using VNC or the job composer, which is a lot more in depth than we went in today. So I think that's pretty much it for today. We covered a lot of the topics that surround the Open On Demand portal and the dashboard. Oh, one last thing that I want to end with. So there is the Grace dashboard, which provides information on the clusters, about usage, your own usage. And then if you can see the number of jobs running, pending. We can see my own jobs. If I need to kill a job, I can do it through here. And it'll also link you to the job composer. And then if you do, this is a really useful tool if you ever need a quota increase on your Scratch storage. The preferred way of requesting quota increases through this portal. You can justify and specify how much space you need, along with your justification and your file limits. Along with that, you can also see your own usage, so that way you can monitor and see how you are doing with your cluster services. So I think that's about it. And as Chief said, we will be announcing short courses very soon.
There's another question.
There's a question in the chat.
I think okay. So if you launch a notebook from a terminal, it would be the same process. You would have to set up port forwarding, or I think it's VNC. I think we have more information about that on the wiki. If another staff member wants to try to answer that, they might have a better. I've never used it from the terminal, but it's basically the same process. And we have. I personally don't have experience with launching it from the terminal, but I'm pretty sure it's along that same process. Oh, there you go. Dylan answered that question. And it'll also be slow, so.
Yeah, it will be in the main node, launching the notebook in the main node.
So the login nodes, if you launch it from the login nodes, it'll be slow and really not preferred. But the compute nodes don't have network access, so you couldn't launch it from the compute node. So you can like access the main node.
And we cannot submit a Scratch job using Jupyter Notebook. We cannot submit a job. We can just run it online and in time. We cannot submit a Jupyter Notebook to run, right?
As a job?
Yeah.
No.
Oh. What are you trying to do? Like submit the job of the Jupyter Notebook as a job to the cluster.
So normally, because you want to run in the queuing system as interactive, So normally what you would do is you would have the commands that are in the Jupyter Notebook, and you would run it as a Python job. The Jupyter Notebook is set up so you have very interactive and graphical. So if you need help converting your Jupyter Notebook to a command line that you submit to the queue, we can help you with that.
Oh, okay, nice. Thanks.
So we had a question in the room about submitting a Jupyter Notebook as a job. So the ideal way to look at it is the Jupyter Notebook is a way to visualize and create an interactive way to interact with your Python code. So what we would suggest is sending in your Python job or your Python code as a job. So it performs on the compute node. So that way you can specify, you don't have to waste SUs on a notebook, but rather spend it on the compute clusters or the GPU nodes. So does anyone else have any questions about either the Open On Demand portal, Jupyter Notebook, or anything Hprc related? We can try to answer that as well.
You will be offering courses in R, like RStudio, in cluster.
So a little bit about the short courses we have coming up. There will be announced soon, and you'll be able to see it in short courses. I don't have the full list of topics right now, but they'll be coming out soon, and you can choose to come to those as well. And they're a lot more in depth. They have a lot of information, and they run for 2.5 hours as opposed to this one where it's 1 hour. So I think they're a great opportunity to learn more about our Hprc resources and using the clusters for your computational needs. So it'd be a great idea to look into it. So Keith just posted one of the short courses, which is our intro to Hprc, which will cover a lot of the things that we did in primers, such as all the clusters, information about the clusters, connecting, and information that we covered today, such as the Open On Demand portal. Yeah, and then I'll let Keith post the rest of the courses. but we do have a lot of short courses coming up, and their information is available on the website. So if you need more information regarding it or have any questions, feel free to email us at help@hprc.tama.edu. So yeah, so the class list will be updated very soon, and then it'll be available pretty quickly. So does anyone else have any questions about the portal, Hprc, or Jupyter Notebook? Okay. So if no one else has any questions, thank you for coming out. This